the sort of standard what we see mostly on 12-6, where it's kind of an early aggressive jungler, sometimes more often than not sort of a weak side top, hype carry AD, something that scales in the mid lane, or are they going to do sort of more aggressive drafts like what we saw out of them in planes where they lock in something like the Sylas with a kill jungler as well, and they just try and play off the mid jungle 2v2 and move that pressure down. That's what I'm excited for Unicorns here today.
Well, let's have a look as we move into Champ Select for our first game of the day. Unicorns of Love Sexy Edition on the blue side. We've got a letter on the red. Jamada, I know that you love yourself a Champ Select, and there's going to be no trundles around here.
No, there will be no trundles around here. Hopefully, that also is an omen of no trolling in the Champ Select. We'll see. But the response will be that Volibear moved away. Of course, Volibear is pretty much unanimously B1 by most teams if it's open. Sometimes you do see it traded, of course. The Poppy will be taken off the table away from Atleta 2. I wonder if they're trying to set up for an early Jarvan pick then with the Volibear off the table. With that Poppy gone too. That's maybe what the first thing that comes to my mind. Tahm Kench taken off the board as well for Dreamer Ace and Zeri. Which more often than not, it feels like we see on red side removed away as opposed to blue. But we've definitely seen a shift of that priority. And Veigar, I'm sure you'll be happy to see, is removed away, which says to me, now that that Jinx has been locked in, Atleta are likely going to take the Ahri in the early rotation. It's something that we've definitely seen a lot of yesterday as well. I think 100% presence, and in the 4 games that it was up, it was taken in either the first or the second rotation, B2B3, on the blue side. But AD locked in. I expect that Ahri to probably be locked in here, and Mighty Dragon can maybe get a pick. But for now, it seems like they're maybe going to just pick up Enz's Xayah to ensure that they have the AD to AD matchup, and they just want to hide what they will pick up.
I mean, picking up the Ahri here would make a lot of sense. Of course, we also saw a letter their Fresh was banned against them last time around. They've held a preference for that champion a lot during their time in playoffs over at the PG Nats. But it's going to be the Jarvan, as you said, locked in. And Unicorns are maybe considering that one themselves with the Poppy ban away. But this allows stuff like the Ahri to have got through. There's other jungle options as well. Stuff like the Xin Zhao and Hecarim spring to mind.
I think something like Viego Ahri could be kind of powerful here for Unicorns. I think Lorix is very, very prominent on this champion, very, very proficient. I think last tournament, was it Lorix? I believe it was just like Lee Sin Viego, and that was all he played. But for now, it's actually just going to be an early Gnar rotation here for Ibo, and that Ahri will eventually come in. So it looks like Unicorns are going to have to, more times than not, have their jungle pool pinched out here come the second ban phase. And for Atleta, I think if you want to go for something like Rakan, just because you can move into something like support bans, if you're okay with Lorix's champion pool staying up, you can do that. But you're definitely looking at either a mid counter pick, which Sylas would make the most sense here. I think it's one of the few champions that can match Ahri in lane in terms of sort of like being able to sustain through a lot of the damage and then also gaining access to the Spirit Rush. What's scarier than a Sylas that already dashes like 3 times, then giving Sylas 3 more extra dashes, that reset?
It's not going to be fun if you manage to get Zonix going as we move into our second round of bans. Notably, Ibo does love this Gnar. I believe before, not taking into account yesterday, he played either Gnar or Graves in 13 games in playoffs over in the Prime League region or in play-ins for the Amazon European Masters. So definitely knows his way around the Yordle. Actually, it's going to be a letter who ban away the Fresh, and I wouldn't be shocked to see Nautilus also taken off the table.
Yeah, I wonder if we're just going to end up seeing a bunch of support bans here come out from both teams. I mean, if you're used, you could also go towards things like Gabo's Camille and also Gabo's Jace, perhaps, to sort of remove away these counters into the Gnar, and that would also obviously be the other sensible option here. But we could also just see them remove away support options that are going to sort of enable Jarvan to dive more, or actually just engage options in general, moving away the Ornn from Gabo. I think that also makes a whole bunch of sense. So I think in general, Unicorns here, they're looking to remove away engage options whether it comes from the top side or the bottom side. And I think they're eyeing up, I would imagine, just more dive into what Unicorns are running right now, come that R4 pick.
Yeah, and we're just going to have to see what they decide to remove. Of course, the Rakan could make sense down in that support role. It's already got Xayah alongside it. We don't really see these two champions played together. And I mean, taking away dive is going to be the least sin, someone who is often banned away in the first rotation. So it's good that they've remembered him.
Yeah, it's good that they remember them, but I imagine Lorix will probably end up leaning on the Viego now. Akali actually taken away from Gabo. So the likes of the Camille and of course the Jace are still there. So both, I think would fit very well into what Atleta's comp currently can do. It can either dive, it can also kind of just allow ends to play at range with the feathers. And I think both of those champions kind of play into either style, right? You go Jace, you have more poke. You go the Camille, you have more dive. It's really up to you. And you can hold on to your support pick, or you can actually go for something like the set, which we saw yesterday out of Gabo. This technically also works as a flex too, we have to remember. So now Unicorns, they have to think quite a lot about what they want to run into the bottom lane. because if they run something that's, you know, super tanky, something like the Nautilus, it's very easy to chuck that straight back in. And Prospect can have a pretty fine time in that matchup. Don't tease me with a Kayn hover, because this is a pretty good Kayn game. But I expect that we will see the Viego come out, and that is what we do end up seeing Lorox on. And now for support, I think you either want a little bit of engage here, because you are definitely lackluster on some of that sort of long-range engage right now. You're more about the pick with the Ahri charm and sort of playing pockets of fog. I think you need something that can actually get fights going. Leona, Nautilus, both up. I think you probably take the Leona side of the matchup, if either, and it seems like that's what we will get out of Unicorns.
Now it's going to be a case of Atleta deciding whether they want to send that set up to topside like we've seen it before, or whether they want to flex it down into the support role up against this Leona and give themselves a different matchup into the Gnar. I mean, set Gnar isn't the worst matchup that Gabo is ever going to see, especially when it comes to a ranged top laner. We don't love those around these parts, but it's going to be a question of what they want to go for. And of course, the Rakan was left available, and it does have that little bit of extra when it goes with the Zarya, so it's going to be locked in. And talk about engage, it looks like Atleta have found the last piece of their puzzle.
Yes, and they have a whole bunch of it rounding out the draft of the Rakan. Just kind of says to me that they are going to be looking to moving forward more times than they not. But I think, honestly, Unicorns, they have a very good draft at dealing with champions that want to come into them. If you're moving into Ahri, Ahri's always going to be able to Spirit Rush back. It's kind of setting up for easy skill shots to land as well. Viego loves champions diving onto him because then he just gets to play the game, period. And as for Gnar, of course, you can get into that Mega Gnar state if you've got loads of champions diving on you. You can always peel for your carries with the Gnar ult too. So I think loads of strong options against what Atleta are running for Unicorns, but also a lot of strong proactivity options as well for both these sides. Not just Atleta, obviously, who you look towards and you say they've got the Jarvan, they've got the Rakan. Even the Silas is going to have strong options because he's going to gain access to pretty powerful engage tools as well from Unicorns. I think we're looking at a very explosive draft here, no matter where you look. Top, mid, bottom side, the 2v2, the 3v3s. Everything looks like it could kind of go either way here. I don't necessarily edge any particular draft or, you know, sort of skirmish power towards either side.
I'm scared, and here's why. Atleta cannot let anyone die in team fights. Because as soon as one person dies, Viego, Ahri, Jinx, it's Reset City, basically.
It's spooky. It's very, very spooky, and I think especially the power of the base abilities on all of these champions as well, particularly the top side, right? Basebreaker, Haymaker, Flag and Drag, Silas Kit. If Lorox gets his hands on any of these champions, it's probably going to be another reset that follows up. And like you say, Reptile, Ruby, Ahri, Jinx, excited, more Spirit Rush dashes. It's going to be very obnoxious to deal with. But we're here.
We've done it.
We're going to get our first game.
Ooh, the first game, Amazon European Masters of the day. Of course, there were plenty of games yesterday and in play-ins as well. We've got Unicorns of Love Sexy Edition on the blue side, taking on Atleta Esports on the red. Unicorns, of course, have themselves a win already in the group stages. Atleta chasing their first after defeat yesterday. Both of these teams, honestly, I'm expecting a close run game.
Yeah, no, so am I. I think Atleta yesterday, their performance against LDLC is nothing to sneer at. I think they could have very easily walked away with a win, given how they performed. I think LDLC maybe not playing at their ceiling entirely yesterday. One of the things where maybe something like you haven't played a stage game in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks or so, things like that can sneak in. Atleta, same case really, but still came out definitely swinging. Again, it's just about those cross-map plays, right? When you're making a play on a side lane in the early stages, if it's getting cross-mapped for effectively, you know, the same amount of gold that you're maybe making off the play with less players invested, the play is effectively a net negative as lanes have started up. Minions are here. Junglers both starting on red buff. I expect Mighty Dragon will probably path down towards the bottom side and maybe try and get some early action going.
Something that is worth noting as well when we talk about that is an amazing point you bring up, talking about how these teams might be a little bit cold coming through in their first game, not having played on stage for a couple of weeks. Previously in Amazon European Masters, in this tournament, teams that come through play-ins tend to do pretty well because they're warmed up, they've played a little bit more here in this environment, and teams have gone on to come through play-ins to win the tournament in the past. Obviously not last year, with the LFL defending back-to-back titles, but teams like Misfits spring to mind. I believe Rogue made a deep run similarly, maybe even won it coming through play-ins. So for Unicorns to be all warmed up and ready to go, could be a big advantage.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you, especially when you consider how rigorous the play-in schedule actually is as well. You have to play multiple games a day, 2 times, and especially when you consider the format here. Week 1, right, you obviously have, the slightly more spread out schedule, but week 2, everybody plays their final 3 games on the same day, and Unicorns, they're going to be used to that, already having come through the planes, like you say. Lorox, using the information that he gained from Mighty Dragon's attempt at that level 2, will steal away the Raptors, so getting a little bit of counter jungling going. Has no camps on the opposite side to be cross-mapped. However, look at where MX Dragon is right now, mid lane.
Looking for it. Ruby goes low, but the Ignite takes Silas lower. We'll be able to survive with that pot running. Remember, kids, always have a pot running when you're fighting, because it could just save your life twice.
Yeah, it could save your life twice indeed. Zonic's going to be probably grinning at himself. Getting away with that greed, stepping up, Blade the Rune King isn't enough to actually take him down, but it was sadly very close. But this wave state is not particularly in a great spot for him, and Jarvan isn't going to be able to help him because Lorox is right here to respond if they try and get the shove in. So Ruby in a pretty comfortable position. Chucks Orbital Deception through, which might actually make it bounce back, and you see Zonix kind of notices this and decides to show face again now that he's back at half HP with those pots ticked. Hits level 4, decides to go for the reset. And of course, both these laners actually have Ignite. That's something to definitely on Zonix's end of things. It's not something we often see on the Silas lanes. We'll almost, by default, just end up with teleport. It's what we see in the meta almost always. So definitely looking towards that kill pressure, just wasn't able to find it in that exchange.
Dragon just clearing up his Krugs as there's a little bit of support from Gabo, who's putting down some vision, potentially looking towards that top lane. Mighty Dragon had a very decent performance yesterday on the Volibear. Of course, we saw that one banned away because it's one of the strongest champions in the meta, but was making a lot of stuff happen for his team early. And unfortunately, when the game slowed down a little bit, LDLC were just able to take control. But I expect to see similar from him today. Probably not in top lane as Ibo is pushed under his tower, but we could see a return play mid.
Yeah, definitely could see a return play mid. I would love to see MX Dragon link up with Zonix again in the mid lane. I think especially in this matchup, right, you have so much set up onto Ahri, especially pre-6. She's already level 5 though, so you're kind of working on maybe 3-4 more waves at most if you're lucky, in order to try and pick up a kill before that Spirit Rush comes online. Because after then, it's going to be very difficult. Of course, Zonix, however, will technically gain access to that ultimate himself if he needs it for the setup on a chase down. But we'll see whether or not they can actually attack that mid lane. Haven't really looked too much at the bottom lane either, where Reptile is pretty much even with Ends on the CS department. Nothing really too exciting to talk about in the bottom lane, which often it feels like, I don't know, maybe coming from the NLC, we see so many bloody bottom lane 2v2s. So frequently it's just a bit of a breath of fresh air. Dream Ace is doing his best to hold this freeze, as Reptile did try and take an early base, and it seems like Dream Ace will be successful in holding this for the most part.
Takes a beat from Kospek though, who just wants to make it as painful as possible. Lorok's going to be starting up the Dragon Mountain, first one of the day for us, and should be able to steal this one away. Dragon's in the neighborhood, but in the top lane, Ibo putting some damage down onto Gabo, throwing one more rock before backing away.
Yeah, ultimate exchanged up here as well by Ibo. Gabo still level 5, should gain access to that suplex quite soon. And Lorox, just good timing, recognizes the Ends, goes for that reset as Mighty Dragon will try and jump onto him with that Flagging Dragon, not going to be able to quite reach it. Pretty clean Dragon take there by Lorox, just leveraging the information he has at hand, knows that at the very least it will only really be Kospect, maybe MX Dragon at worst, but we'll always have the rotation of Ruby coming in first. Now that wave has crashed back in. It's Zonix who has first move, but still level 5. Oh, charm goes wide. Zonix will be able to walk away. But if that charm connects, you imagine, honestly, with Lorox right there, Flash Spectral Maw, Dream Ace right behind him, that would have been a dead Silas.
You got to imagine so, but this time around, he drinks another pot and just stands on the tower, waiting to collect that wave as it crashes on through. And with the first dragon going down, about a minute and a half for the Rift Herald spawn, it's time for the supports just to go on a walk, visit the beautiful sights of the top side of Summoner's Rift, and gain as much vision control as they can, as second buffs will be spawning. But something that I want to just bring to everyone's attention, Zonix in the mid lane on this Silas. This is his 4th game on the champion since the beginning of playoffs over in the PG Nationals. Currently a 100% win rate on the champ. So definitely knows his way around the Silas. And as you mentioned before, he's been given, thankfully by Unicorns of Love, a lot of really, really nice tools to utilize.
Yeah, no, he definitely has. There's no real shortage of a good ultimate besides maybe the Jinx Rocket. So about when he presses that R key, you expect should be okay. And Aibo has really been giving Gabo a beating in this lane for the last couple of minutes now, 2 minutes or so. Last time he panned up here, Gabo was being forced out at a level disadvantage this time. Aibo just kind of runs him down with the hyper procs. Sonics does have the Spirit Rush in back pocket right now. My Dragon is actually walking down towards the bottom side. Herald is spawning up soon, so if he does go for a bottom side play at this moment in time, with Lorax being where he is, having cleared all his camps and being on that top side with both solo lane priorities, if he shows down there, that should be a Herald for use, but it seems like now they are actually going to try and make the rotation up towards the mid lane themselves in many pockets of fog right now. But the jungle and support are going to spot each other out on this sweeper.
I think Dreamrest is a little bit too tanky, but the fight is going to kick off regardless as Cosmic diving on forward towards the Silas. Just to give him a little bit of a shield as Viego, no interest in partaking, just wants to be up there taking down the Rift Herald. And hey, last game it was we talked about making trades, and this time around Alena didn't even get anything for the exchange.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is just good jungle pathing from Lurox to basically clear most of his camps from the bottom side. No cross map in the jungle. Mighty Dragon didn't go for the bottom side play either. And it just ensures that with both top and mid having shoving lanes and first move, that he would always get that Herald nearly uncontested as Sonics. He's a pretty nasty trade. Spirit Rush. I think he's dead.
A lot of damage. First blood goes the way of Ruby.
Yeah, Ruby just comes out big there with the Ignite. And Sonics just doesn't really have much of an answer. Once that Ignite is down as well, of course, the Kingslayer healing is just cut by too much. If he even wanted to try and respond there, just eats that extra Orb of Deception as well, which kind of just puts him in lethal range, gets run down, and now he's also going to miss that massive wave. No teleport to come back into the lane. No one's even there meeting it. I think actually Dreamer Ace is taking a plate in the mid lane. I'm not too sure. Did stay to get that wave crashed up in there. And now Lurox with the Herald, I think more times than not, you just put it into Reptile's back pocket. Makes the most sense. You can definitely go up towards the top side if you really feel like it. Aibo has been having a very, very good time as, again, we pan up towards the top side to see him having a very successful trade. I think Jinx is your hyper carry. You want it in her back pocket. I think priority has definitely been back and forth, but I think you can definitely leverage the fact that now Ruby has a lead in this mid lane, should have first move down towards the bottom side, get priority in the mid lane, move down as a pair, Lurox and Ruby, and try and make this wave crash. Maybe they're trying to work on this wave here, but the issue is we're seeing a response from a
3v3 as Lurox coming on through. This is the first big fight of the game. First kill goes over to Reptile as Ends standing on the side of Kaliskun, keeps Leona in place, and it'll be one more feather, this time from the Ricard, to secure another kill, and Lena go 2 for 0.
And this is just a great read from a player. Honestly, they can see the wave is stacking up slowly. They know Ruby's almost always going to be able to pick up wave priority in the mid lane whenever Ruby feels like it. And now, instead, I think doing the correct thing, just trying to make the rotation up from the mid lane as Lurox and just dropping the Herald here to at least get some more plates in a trade across the map. But Athlea, they really do read out on that play superbly. It was definitely a little bit telegraphed with that slow wave stack, but nonetheless, very impressive that they were able to counter out the play and win out the 3v3.
Just putting some pain down in the top side, throwing more of those drills. And this is what we talked about going into this game from what we saw yesterday, right? And let her make a good return play. Oh, Gabo. He wasn't in shop. We always love to see that. So he dodges out the Jinx ultimate. But immediately, Lurox goes mid, grabs himself some gold, and 4 plates down in the mid lane as Aibo has to hop away. Let's have another look at this fight. And where does it start going wrong?
I mean, I think it's just the fact that, you know, Reptile, Dream Ace, they're right on top of each other, and of course, Athlea, Jarvan in the bottom bush, ready to respond to that knockup, the grand entrance from Prospect. Just great chain CC, really. That's where it goes wrong. There's no response from Dreamer Ace. Wasn't able to drop the solar flare. I think the issue is for Unicorns that they actually just can't respond to the counterplay.
We got Dragon spawned up though. Second of the game will be Ocean. So these two teams could look to play around that one and reveal what we're going to get as our Soul Drake first game in this Amazon European Masters second day of group stages. However, Alena on the top side, maybe wanting to relieve some pressure on Gabo, who, as you've mentioned a couple of times, we haven't been watching too much of this top lane because there haven't been kills or priority around it. But the Nara is being a bit of a bully. Yeah,
definitely is being a bit of a bully. Gabo falling quite far behind in CS, actually. As well, 25 CS or so down. Not having the best of times in this lane. And of course, did pick up the set yesterday, picked it up here, knowing he would be into the Nart. Just hasn't been able to find that trading success. Sort of after that level 5, level 6 mark, and down here now on the bottom side, it will be Unicorns picking up this Dragon yet again. So we'll put them on a fast track to a potential early Soul. What will we get? Looks like Infernal. And I think both these teams really use the Infernal so well. A lot of very quick spell procs on both ends. Means that Infernal, the passive itself, will proc quite quickly, and of course, so many damage carries. The additional adapter stats are always going to be helpful, as my Dragon just going to slip away from Aibo there. As mid lane, 1v1 again.
Yeah, Zolix in trouble. He's been ignited, so there's not that much healing coming down. A nice charm, dives forward, dodges away from Leona ultimate. And Ruby can't apply the finishing touch. Zolix gets away with murder.
Yeah, Q1 just goes wide there from Ruby. I think he also had the option additionally of just Spirit Rushing again forward, getting the extra proc of damage, and then probably killing Zonix more often than not. But instead, opts for the slightly safer play, goes for that Q1, misses out on the Orb of Deception, and unfortunately isn't able to find himself that kill. Wouldn't have quite been a solo, as Dreamer Ace did manage to get the Solar Flare down and find the slow and a little bit of damage, but close enough to it, honestly. And despite having the counter pick in this mid lane, Zonix has just not been having a good time into Ruby. Ruby has been running this lane.
And has been given so much advantage from Lurox as well, giving him those...
Yeah.
Three of those 4 plates were given over by Lurox on the Viego, and that kind of gold lead is going to be amazing with the Everfrost already being secured for the Ahri, giving that extra utility and allowing for those 1v1 plays to be a little bit easier to hold the Sylas down. But plate's going to be falling off very, very soon. It looks like Zonix is going to be able to grab Eddie for himself. Ends might just be looking to take one more before we hit the 14-minute mark. But honestly, we saw a lot of speed and a lot of action in the early games yesterday. Today's been a little bit more tentative so far.
Yeah, definitely has been. Only 3 kills in the first 14 minutes of game 1 here. But definitely a lot more poking and prodding, it feels like, as opposed to actual overall commits. As Gabo probably going to eat another one, but the wallop goes wide.
Looking towards him. The mid lane tower will fall immediately after the 14-minute mark. No plates to defend it. This time around, it will be the Unicorns, and maybe this is just the MO of Unicorns I love, because their game yesterday was also the one which had the slowest early game, it felt like, where both of these teams kind of just feeling each other out. If we're in for a little bit of a longer one, Jamada, is there a team that's really going to favor that?
Oh, I mean, I feel like when you think about how these comps interact with one another, how Atheta are almost always going to be wanting to try and dive into the Unicorns composition here, which is so efficient at kiting back for the most part. It's only really Dreamer Ace, Leona that maybe feels a little bit out of place in that theme. But of course, Unicorns, they needed the option to maybe return some engage, and that's why the Leona's there. I feel like Unicorns are honestly quite comfortable with this current game state. I think Viego is going to scale into a bit of a monster here. I think Ahri's almost always going to be useful, especially with the Everfrost. With all the short-range champions, going to skip out, being locked up by the chains as well. And of course, the threat of the resets, right? I think that's the biggest thing. If any of these members from a flare, overstep whilst they're diving, which is obviously the big risk of diving, right? Going that one step too far forward and giving up your life, all of a sudden, you're giving Lurox the Viego a flag and drag, you're giving him a rotation of Sylas spells, a grand entrance from the Rakan, it could be anything. And I think the later the game goes on, the bigger the threat of that is. So I think for Athleta right now, they really want to try and find some point on the map where they can leverage a strong side, actually leverage some kind of lead. It seems like right now they're just not able to quite do that. Gabo being forced away back towards bot tier 2 as Aibo shoves in and crashes a wave on the bottom side. Lurox could even drop the Herald down here just to ensure that the tower drops, but could even just take it without.
I know Gabe's playing the hard defense and is going to move towards Lurox, takes away half his health bar, dunks now back into his team, and here comes Jarvan 4. Nice wallop into the wall though, it means that Aibo's going to be able to get away. The Cataclysm will not save the tower as Lurox flashes over the wall, looking to escape through the alcove, gets a blast code out, but it's not going to be avoiding the stun, the bring back, and the damage from Atlanta. Cosbeck comes in with the ultimate, doesn't want to go towards Lurox, wants to turn towards the rest of the Unicorns team that's turned up. The Jinx ultimate will land in Sylas' face, square head on as Dream Race dives over the wall, flashing away, but the Ignite will burn him out. Cosbeck picks up another. It's 2 kills to the good for the PG in that side, but they do lose the tower.
They do lose the tower, but they pick up those kills, and I think that's definitely going to feel good. Ends is also on the top side, entirely uncontested. This is a wave that's going to be probably lost out. It depends on whether or not Ends wants to just take this tower and immediately reset for some tempo. It seems like that will be the case. So honestly, I think I went out quite nicely here. They even up the gold lead yet again, and they just respond to what was a little bit of an overextension from Unicorns there. Aibo sort of gets that nut armor off underneath the tower, dives away. Lurox feels like then he's pressured to pick up this tower. We'll get the replay, but it will be after those events as Lurox kind of a little bit too far away from his team at this point, right? Has to go in alcove game, gets the blast cone as well. Does buy a lot of time to try and at least have a response from his teammates, but unfortunately it just means that Dreamer Ace ends up being caught out as well on the back end.
with nowhere to go. The flash is nice, but the ignite rolling was just enough as we're going to jump back into the action as Rakan goes low conflict. Needs to be careful, diving away. Nice ultimate coming through from the side to get Dream Race. Once again, Ruby, though, goes low and is deleted by the Zarya. Ends is now going to chase on towards Dream Race. The rest of Atlanta needs to be a little bit careful. Health bars not too high as we move towards this dragon. The snipe out from Reptile, and that is going to be the excitement. The zap doesn't land this time around, but Jinx is still feeling confident to roar forward, flashing away from my dragon, but it's a nice cataclysm. The duck down is enough, but Ends is on a killing spree. Massive Nara ultimate into the wall as Ends dancing away, manages to survive for a second longer, but Viego, this time with the reset, will he be able to get away? Zonix on the side, really low, diving back in. Lurox grabs another as Zonix sits and watches 4 members of Letter fall down, and it will be Unicorns of Love who move towards the Drake.
And this is what we're talking about. If Atlanta can get things going first, then they can actually take down the first target. Things look not too bad for them, but the issue is, if you start to see resets like that come out, it just feels so impossible to play. And unfortunately, Lurox just ends up taking over the fight. You get a replay, and it's actually Ruby going on to Prospect and just kind of overreaches a little bit, dives one too far forward, and has to end up flashing out, but gets caught by the Everfrost of Zonix, reared up. Ruby's feather gets taken out by the Feather Storm, and at this point, they've kind of won out the team fight, but the health bars are so low, and this is the risk of running, you know, these dive compositions, these short-range compositions into a comp that's so efficient at running backwards and away from you. And then it just turns into the Lurox show after this. My Dragon dives in, the Cataclysm, it's not too bad with the stopwatch. They pick up Dreamer Ace, but unfortunately, it's just the resets on top of resets from Lurox here, who just picked up so many strong champions, the Heartbreaker after Heartbreaker. And unfortunately, that's what he does to the PG Nats side. Their Hearts wins this fight. It brings Unicorns 1 dragon closer to picking up that Infernal Soul.
And Ibo's ultimate was absolutely insane into the wall in that fight as well, able to catch out so many members of Atlanta. Unfortunately, the Rift Herald unlikely to get too much work done as he's caught between a minion wave, but Ruby's moving up maybe to try and help it get through. It will fall. Gets a tiny bit of damage and clears out the wave, but an unfortunate turn of events to not have that second advantage really achieve very much. But Unicorns of Love grabbed their first teamfight win of the game, find themselves about 2,000, just under 2,000 gold up at the 20-minute mark, but now they're pulling the trigger, moving towards Reptile, but he's going to be able to get away with Gale Force. It's not a summoner, but it's just as good, and we'll be able to see him out.
Yeah, just able to Gale Force away from that one. Still has the safety of that item, and I thought kind of just left scratching their heads here on that play afterwards. Only do expend, of course, Conspec's Flash and Ultimate. Flash definitely a much bigger timer, but they do get Reptiles, Gale Force. Maybe they can make a play off cooldown. I think more often than we will see here, they're going to have to just do their best to stay within arm's reach in terms of gold and try and contest at this Infernal Soul. I think Unicorns, they're just going to slow the game down now. Best that they can, not overextend in the side lane, not overextend in the mid lane either. We've seen the potential range of engage here from Atleta's team composition between the Rakan and Jarvan. Feels like you have to be 2 screens away or more. Otherwise, you are at risk of being dove. And I think showing by Reptiles respect on the mid lane, just waits for the wave to be entirely delivered to him. And we'll probably have a little bit of downtime as Unicorns, I expect, will just try and keep Atleta as far away from them as possible until this dragon spawns up.
I've got a little bit of deja vu, Jamada, because I'm thinking back to the game that Unicorns were playing yesterday up against Bisons. It was around the 3rd dragon where they really started to put on the style against them as well, where they managed to take the right pick, they made the right call, and it was a Jinx that helped lead them through a massive team fight. It's exactly what we've seen right here up against Atleta as well. Slightly different circumstances, it must be said, because it's 2 different games of League of Legends with 2 different compositions, but maybe Unicorns, as you said, with that slightly slower priority when it comes to team style, this could really be the turning point in most of their games where they decide this is where we need to start taking advantages, this is where our win condition starts to come into play.
Yeah, I think the problem is when it comes to kind of the conditions of how both of these team comps want to fight, I think Unicorns just end up kind of outscaling sort of on a level of Atleta's kind of conditions are pretty much conditional on do they blow up Reptile or not, right? Are they able to blow up someone like Ruby or not, who's going to just have pretty much too much mobility in many of these scenarios where Ruby's getting dove onto, and that's what just makes Ahri so frustrating to play against. So it's more about, can Atleta actually take down their high-value targets before Unicorns are able to turn it around with their sort of kite-back comp into any kind of resets. And again, that is the risk you run with a composition so dive-heavy and engage-heavy like Atleta's into a comp which has so many reset mechanics. in general. You saw that third Dragon fight, how low the health bars got just to take down one member.
And that was an overextended Ahri with only one charge of the ultimate left up. So if Ruby's holding on to that ability for the next fight, which you've got to imagine will be happening in about 40 seconds time, things could be much, much harder for Atleta. And of course, they found themselves in a bit more of a deficit now because they lost that fight, because they're fighting against one more Infernal in the pocket of Unicorns. And Atleta controlling the river, don't want to give any opportunity for the Unicorns to move on through. As Ibo moving around the side, he's got the range bar up, but the ultimate's not going to land onto anyone. That's a big whiff, and that's a big ability going to go wanting from the Unicorns. And now Atleta are feeling confident to try and pull the trigger, get themselves going, set into the backline. That's a big, deep play, but Gabo's going to be deleted. Reptile gets the first kill of the fight as they move towards Lurox. Lurox has to flash away from the Cataclysm. Will be able to escape this time around, but the fight looks okay for Atleta on the side. As they move towards Ruby, he's going to dance away, puts in a bit of healing, now can maybe move towards Zonix. This is ebbing and flowing back and forth. Atleta take down one. They lose two for their troubles, but Zonix is low. Reptile on the side, looking towards Dragon. Needs to be careful, kiting it away. Ivo returns to the fight as Atleta are removed. That'll be it towards the Dragon. The zap, the shot, the jump from Gnar. It's an ace for the Unicorns as they move towards the mid lane.
Yeah, and it's just really well played by Unicorns. Ibo, even though he ends up whiffing on that ultimate, and honestly the Mega Gnar timing as well, in terms of being able to be online for the actual Dragon Spawn itself, was a little bit off. He makes up for it because he zones out ends entirely on the top side of the fight by himself, whilst the diving party of Atleta are basically trying to 3v3 the remainder of Unicorns. The rest of the sort of burst damage isn't quite there. It's just the bruisers of Atleta that are trying to take down some of the carries that remain up for Unicorns. Ibo, despite, again, an ultimate that definitely was a little bit lackluster, plays a very, very big role in ensuring that Atleta end up losing that team fight. As we get the replay here, I think maybe just tried to leap into Gnar ult. That's my best guess. Just inputted the keys. And then it's just this flash forward. Gabo just goes too deep. I mean, look at where the rest of Atleta are. They're just not able to reach that level of range. Yes, the engage range is quite high on their composition, but it's just not that far. As you can see, Ents being forced away by Ibo, and actually it's Reptile at the same time. Ibo chases him down on the bottom side, even though they do find Lurox. It's now a 3v3 where, you know, the consistent kind of ranged burst damage is no longer there. And you imagine if Atleta are actually, you know, in a 4v4 with Xayah who's being protected, this is a fight that can definitely go their way. And this is an absolutely amazing flash by MX Dragon to try and lock down Ruby. But unfortunately, I think got a charm out on to the Silas just before the rest of the CC came in, and that's what stopped the majority of the burst damage coming in from the mid laner of Atleta.
So Unicorns find themselves the Infernal Soul, and that makes things much harder for them. Ruby needs to be careful, just gonna dive on through. Remember, Ibo not at the scene of the crime right now. He's in bot lane trying to push towards that tower, but will be able to get there with a teleport if he decides to. Gabo is the one that's going to respond, you've got to imagine, but he's just thinking about staying around, maybe trying to get a flank or a play working. But Gnar is going to be able to take the free inner tower in the bot lane, as no one's really pulling the trigger. Unicorns are really happy just to control the mid lane and allow Ibo to naturally move up towards them. Of course, there's a top lane inner if the Unicorns want to try and play towards that one as well. But Baron, potentially going to be the next thing that's fought over?
Yeah, I think so. I think the big issue right now for Atleta and why they looked so lost right there is because Gabo just outright loses in the 1v1. And Gabo wanted to stick around in the mid lane just in case